Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone watching around the world, and welcome back to Congress for Global Communication. CGC exists to promote diverse and inclusive dialogue resulting in civility for all. Now, our roundtable discussion today will focus around quality education. And let me tell you, the panel, they're really passionate about what they do. They're really passionate about this initiative, and you'll see that. My co-host for today is Benjamin Morton, Esquire. Yes, he's an attorney and a former pro basketball player as well. And you'll hear other things about him as well as I bring him out and he introduces himself. But before we get started, I need you to do three things for me. One, if you could please put in the feed where you're watching from. This will tell us who is joining us or who's in attendance with us today. Number two, if you have any questions or comments, please put those in the feed as well. This will allow the team to know if there's anything else they need to track or if they're missing any detail that they need to be captured in their presentations going forward. And then finally, share the video. This will allow anyone missing in action to catch us on the replay. So again, thank you for joining us today and welcome. I now present to you my co-host for today, Attorney Benjamin Morton. So Benjamin, if you will take a few minutes, and I'm trying to get you out right now, if you will take a few minutes to go ahead and share with the audience a few things about yourself, that will be very much appreciated.
Okay, well, Sonia, thank you so much for that warm introduction. I'll just say I'll definitely try to keep it very brief. As you mentioned, I am a former attorney. I was a federal prosecutor. I was a United States attorney. I was a military employee with the United States Air Force. I had my own law firm in New Jersey where I practiced corporate law and criminal defense. In 2018, I was one of the top attorneys in the United States as a trial lawyer. In a different life, about 100 years before that, I played professional basketball over in Europe. And it's probably hard to tell right now, but I do stand some things, so basketball came a little bit easy for me. From that, having my own law firm for about 10 years, I decided to hang that up and move to consulting. And so now I am working as a consultant for several large Fortune 500 corporations here in the DC, in the DMV area, where I do corporate consulting and corporate law. And that's a brief snapshot. And I am definitely pro education, so I'm definitely motivated and excited about this sustainable development goal. And we have some great things to share with you today. So please make sure we have your eyes.
Okay, and who would like to bring out first?
I would like to introduce the captain, as I say, captain of the team, the leader of the team, Dr. Ryan. I'm going to hand it all off to you.
Hi guys,
Hi, how are you today?
I'm doing alright. I don't know whether to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, because I know people are all over the world. It's good to see you guys.
It's good to see you too, and it's good to be seen.
That's great. That's great. Let me go ahead and tell you a bit about myself.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for hosting us, Dr. Sonia. Thanks for bringing us on board. This wonderful vision. I'm running on each corner. I actually live in Manchester in the north of England, and I'm very blessed to serve as an apostle of a global ministry called Kingdom Fellowship. And there's something within that I like in my service for God, in that I major in reaching out to young people. And I go across the world ministering to young people in 3 weeks' time in India. And just recently I've been in Zimbabwe, Malawi, Mozambique, and Zambia. I'm all over the place. Just encouraging various topics around youthfulness and growing, and also including education. Also, to say a little bit about myself. I'm a leader for the Global Leadership Forum for Young People, which is a forum that brings together aspiring young people that we inspire to become leaders, and hopefully looking at people like you, Dr. Sonia and Benjamin, as role models. And also locally, I'm the director of the local international charity, which we know about YMCA. A lot of you might know YMCA. We do some wonders in Greater Manchester, and I serve there as a director. I must also mention that for the last 16 years, I've been a founding director for a charity called Zoo Child, which is an education charity that specializes in sending young people to school, feeding them, clothing them, giving them some uniforms, school fees, and also facilitating education for young people in Africa. And I should finish by talking about some other interests which I have. I'm an entrepreneur, so I actually am into some business development, business skills, business management, coaching, and I run a business myself. So I'm very, very excited and privileged to be here. And I think it's our season to talk about reconfiguration of education and equity for education. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You were just in, I think, over in Ghana not too long ago. So, with that, were you dealing with youth over there, or was it strictly church business?
Do you know I actually missed the Ghana trip, even though I was
You missed it.
invited? That was a very good time that was meant to be in Malawi. So it was a clash of programs, but I can tell you that I'll be in India in the next 3 weeks, and then within a month of that, I'll be in Burundi, and I'm all over again, all to do with young people, their wellness, their spirituality, education, business, etc. etc.
Okay. Oh, so this is a perfect fit for you.
Indeed.
A
That's
perfect
my
fit.
calling.
Okay, so Benjamin, we're bringing out Dr. Jarrett next.
Jared, yes, Jared, come on. There is the man. Take a few minutes. I know you can take an hour because you've done some other things, but let's just give it a few minutes if you could. My friend.
And you're on mute. You're good.
Okay. Thank you, Benjamin, and my fellow panelists for giving me an opportunity to introduce myself. Charles is just a mere servant of God and who tries to see good in others and to promote. And I have done this through education. And I don't believe in changing people. I believe in changing an individual. And in the spirit of the Sustainable Development Goals, I promote global partnership, SDG number 17. And this is what has brought us together, and I hope the conversation and engagement you're going to have my evening here and your afternoon from wherever you are is going to benefit our listeners. Thank you. That's what I have to say myself. I've only said I'm a servant of God and a servant of humanity.
Excellent.
I have a comment for Professor Jarrett before we go on, because I called Professor Jarrett because he's always in school or taking classes, so I called him a professional student. So I know this is a perfect fit for him. But okay, with that being said, go ahead, Benjamin.
Well, what I was going to do is I was going to say, Professor Jared, tell us a little bit before I introduce Professor Mateus not with us. Just give us a little bit of background information of the UN's mandate regarding the Sustainable Development Goals, if you would.
I'm not getting your question because there's echo.
Greetings, everyone.
Hello, Professor Matias.
How are you guys?
Real quick. So, Professor Jared, is that better?
Yes, okay now.
Okay.
What was the question?
You were going to give us a little bit of background regarding the United Nations.
Yeah. The world has witnessed two serious major wars. That's the First World War, which was 1914 to 1919. And another one was 1939 to 1945. That's the Second World War. And then they said that they will not continue to be fighting. So they came up with the United Nations in 1945 to try to have a modern society and modern government. So we have had the United Nations in trying to address on issues to do with peace and security. And it came because during after the Second World War there was a lot of destruction. So they wanted to involve themselves in development to develop nations. That's the genesis of the United Nations, and in fact, they have addressed all issues which deal with humanity. Be it water, be it development itself, peace and security. And there is no continent at the moment where people are not having conflict. You can see what's happening in Ukraine and Russia. You can come here in Ethiopia. We are having the government fighting with the Greek people. So those are the mandates, and peace and security is very key. And they have opened all to do with all women, to bring children, about the youth, about the environment. And when you look at sustainable development goals, which are 17 in number, with what I've said, it actually covers that. Number one talks about no poverty. Number two talks about end of hunger. Number three talks about good health and well-being. Our baby tonight is quality education. We are talking about gender equality. That is the background of all issues to do with that. And even the issues are keeping on emerging right now. Climate change is really an issue, especially now when you come to the Horn of Africa and my country. We are having drought and people are dying. Children are not even going to school. So that's why you say that we have come out with the regional bodies in Africa. We are having the African Union, which tries to address these kind of issues. In Europe, they are having European Union. And in Latin America also, the Caribbean are having all these issues. So that's how the United Nations came into being. Benjamin, back to you.
Benjamin, you're on mute.
All clear?
Uh-huh.
Okay, great. My apologies for that. So great. Thank you with that excellent backdrop of the UN and how the mandate has sort of transferred into the Sustainable Development Goals, which one being quality education. So with that backdrop, I'm going to ask Professor Matola, who just joined us. Mateos, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself briefly, and I do appreciate you joining us. I know you had some challenges, but I appreciate you joining us. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yes, may I greet you all. Thank you so much for this wonderful meeting we are having. And allow me to greet our viewers from all over the world. I am Professor Mateus Mutola, all the way from Mozambique, Africa. I basically help professionals, entrepreneurs discover their purpose in life and also so that they can awaken their genius in order for them to maximize their potential so that and enjoy a life of impact and eventually establish an indelible mark and leave a legacy for future generations. And I'm so thrilled and excited to be part of these wonderful projects, especially on the window of quality education, because I believe that education is the key for the transformation of the world at large, especially coming from Africa, living in Africa, Mozambique, and I will believe that's not just about education, but the quality of education that will make a whole difference altogether in our nation and the world at large. So thank you so much. Um, were you able to hear me?
Hear you.
Okay,
Is
thank you.
everyone hearing okay? Shake your heads, give me a thumbs up.
Yep, I can hear everyone
Absolutely.
well.
Okay, okay. So, what I wanted to do here at this point is sort of talk about the importance of quality education. And normally, when you say quality education, the first thing that everyone thinks about is school. But quality education is more than school. And to just to share a little bit of a few examples with you, let's just say if you wanted to give let's say if you wanted to give a summit, but you've never given a summit before. And if you've never done it before, but you go out and you think you've gotten everything in place, I can guarantee that you're going to miss some things because you've not done this before. Do you know that, okay, well, I can build this website where I can have people register on the website, capture their information so I could send them out information later on, or if I want to have something else, I can send this information to them. Well, again, if you've not done this before, it's going to be a challenge. And then education, when you look at some of the other things, we as Professor Jared talked about, he talked about the sustainable development goals. Education hits every one of those sustainable development goals. I was listening to a presentation, I think it was last week, on climate action. And as they were going through the presentation and they were coming up with some ideas that could help, and they started talking about these different types of trees. Well, if you use this tree, this will happen. If you do this, this will happen. And I reassure you, I knew nothing about any of that. But again, when you want to have an intelligent conversation with someone, and it's just like this team itself, when we're done with this, the next step is we're going to reach out to leaders around the world and have these conversations, these hard to have conversations, because right now nothing is occurring that we can see.
Right.
That's not to say that people aren't working on these things, but it's better if we work together versus individually. So if I'm working with someone over in Nairobi and I'm working with someone over in London, and we have these ideas that we can share, and they'll say, "Well, I didn't think about that." But again, that gets to educating and informing people. But in order to do that, you can't just go to school the first 12 years of your life and then on to college and think, okay, I'm done. No, when we talk about education, this is an ongoing process. You have to keep filling your mind with these things that are going on in the world in order to be a part of what's going on, to have these conversations. But I just wanted to throw that out there, but I'm going to open it up to the team at this point for them to give their input. So I'll start with you, Benjamin, and you can just pass it along to your team members.
Yeah, you've actually handed me the ball like on right up under the basket where I could just jump up and slam dunk it. You just made it so easy for me to say, so sort of to describe my passion and my understanding and my appreciation for quality education. But I'm gonna start it. I'm big on quotes, so I'm gonna start with a very powerful quote, and then if somebody can tell me who they think that quote is, I'll give you 3 seconds to tell me. But here's a quote that summarizes to me what you just said regarding the value and the impact that education have universally. Like you said, whether you're in London or America or Zimbabwe, it's the root of who we are and who we should be. The quote I respectfully submit: education is the most powerful weapon. Keep that word weapon in mind because I'm an ex-military guy. So you're gonna hear me talk about boots on the ground. And why they use that word weapon? That's strategic. It's not accidental. It's the most powerful weapon which can be used to change the world. Education is the key to eliminating gender inequality, to reducing poverty, to creating a sustainable planet, to preventing needless deaths and illness, and fostering peace. So, quality education affects all those things. And I submit, as you mentioned, we're falling short on each and every one of those. So, it's important that we understand the value of education. And I submit, in order to understand the value of education, we need to better understand and appreciate the value of human life. Sonia, you and I talked about this before a couple of weeks ago. You know how I feel about the value of human life, because we take care of, we cherish, we put money into, and we take care of those things that we value. And so I submit we need to change that narrative, change that dialogue as we move forward, to understanding and making sure that as global citizens that we all understand and appreciate the value of human life. And then you can understand the value in educating each and every human life. And we're moving in that direction. And there's a lot of moving pieces, but I submit I have a suggestion, which I've shared with my team, to help bring some of the moving pieces together. But the Human Rights Council Resolution 8/4, they're getting it. They're moving us in that direction, because they have issued in their right to education in their resolution, recalling that everyone shall enjoy the human right to education. So now we're looking at a human right, and that's changing and is adding to the narrative that we all must understand. That is a human right to education, which is enshrined inter alia into the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and other pertinent international documents. So you understand there's several documents and there's several moving pieces, and then there's this general understanding out there and this appreciation of the value of education and how it intertwined with human rights. And that's my sort of my introduction, the long way around, if you would. I'm an attorney. Sometimes I have a tendency to be a little bit wordy, as you can see. But that summarizes to me that education, and I hope you're getting this, everyone that's under the sound of my voice, that education is indeed a human right, and it changes and affects all of us. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Ronnie.
Thank you, Benjamin. Thanks for putting some of those things in English. Yeah, when it comes to all these laws and acts and everything, we got them, but we don't know how to apply them. And certainly when you think about education in terms of human rights, then there's a need for us to call for the implementation of that right, because we tend to be selective in what we take and implement, and certainly because education is like a tertiary kind of delivery, we tend to ignore it, and put weight on other elements of human rights, but certainly it cannot be ignored. Why? Right, I didn't come in to talk about that. Let me just try to answer Dr. Sonia's question. And I'm going to try to answer Dr. Sonia in the simplest way, by way of quoting this young person. I asked some people before I came here, a group of young people that I lead, okay? And I asked them and I said, what is quality education to you? And I wanted them really to define quality, because I think that's where the whole story lies. And this young person from Malawi said, quality education is one that focuses on the whole student, on the whole person. Okay? Quality education is one that focuses on the whole person. He went on to talk about it, social, emotional, mental, physical, cognitive development, etc., etc. But if that is the case, that quality education is one that focuses on the whole person, let me take you to another real life example, okay? Just 3 months ago, I was in Zimbabwe. And in Zimbabwe, I was sort of carrying out an assembly, in front of about maybe 300-400 people. And most of them were girls who once every so often, 4 to 6 weeks, they have to miss school for a week or so because they do not have the sanitary needs to be in school. Okay, so if I would go to that school today and ask them what quality education is, their definition would be very different to a young person in London would give me. Okay, I took it back here, last example, took it back here, and then I asked my son what quality education is. He's in his first year in college, okay? And he said quality education to him is about making sure that he gets 3 meals on his school day. And he went on to define some of the desserts that they get at school. And that kind of way of thinking, compare that with somebody who needs some sanitary items for them just to get to attend class, and somebody who probably their grades are sort of almost guaranteed. If you're serious, you can get your pass. What you need to make you do is to feed you so that you can get to attain what you want you to attain. Completely different worlds. So I think we're at a time, Dr. Sonia, whereby we're doing the right thing. We need to talk about this and redefine what quality education is about. I'll stop here for now.
That was a good definition.
Very clear. Excellent definition. Okay, Professor Jared, why don't you give us your definition or what you see as the importance of quality education?
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Benjamin. Let me just quote Ellen G. White. She says that education is the harmonious development of the physical, the mental, and the spiritual power for this life and the life to come. And Nelson Mandela says, and you said it in your quotation, that education is the most powerful weapon in which we can change the world.
You got it.
And he went on to say that no country can really develop unless its citizens are educated. He again retaliated by saying it is not beyond our power to create a world in which all children have the access to good education. Those who do not believe in this have small imaginations. What is the importance of education, as you have asked me to say something on that? What good education can do is essential in gaining the best knowledge and development modernization in a society. It lays a foundation for equity in civilization. It is possible to break the cycle of poverty. And that's what Dr. Sonia said, that when you scan through the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, in fact, education covers all those. And of course, with education, it makes you to be humble, to have a good character, to treat people fairly. So education reduces inequality. And I find that if education has not humbled one, then there's a question. If you are educated, you are supposed to treat people fairly. It also goes in a way to achieve gender equality. And that's what Dr. Ronnie was trying to say. Some countries in Africa was about Malawi. Let me use about Kenya as a case study. When children or girls are having their menses in a month, their monthly periods, they don't go to school. So in this, we are to talk about gender equality, then we have to have the opportunity to treat people fairly, that they must be provided with the certain towers. So it is also key in meeting all goals to attain development in a community. And this is how I look at development. It is a process of improving the qualities of life of the people. How do you improve the life of the people? In terms of infrastructure, in terms of providing them with water, in terms of giving them even the education we are talking about. So education is key because education changes the character of the people. That's what I have to submit up to that point by saying that also quality education can make an individual to change or seek better opportunities. That's why Dr. Ronnie is in UK. If he did not have good education, he will not be there. It also leads to a progress to improve sustainable livelihood, even healthy lifestyles. So education cuts across, and that's why we need to spend more time, not to have lip service, but even to have the treaties we were talking about, so that education can be a human right. I submit at that point.
Passionate, very detailed, and very correct. And I'm glad you recognize that that quote was from Nelson Mandela that I used. So definitely appropriate. Um, Mateus, go ahead. Let us hear your definition and your understanding and appreciation for education or quality education, I should say.
Yes, thank you so much for the mic. Just to add on what my colleagues have just already said, I would define education as anything that stretches the mind and teaches people to think creatively and outside the box, hence embracing their uniqueness and manifest their geniuses. Why have I chosen this as my key definition for education? Is because of what I see happening in my country, in my reality. Our system of education does not, for example, encourage creativity, does not encourage people to think outside the box. You have to submit to the norm or conform to the norm, even at university level. Once you disagree, or maybe let me say there's a quote like now it was mentioned from Nelson Mandela, for example. If in a classroom setting, university level, even if I just say I disagree with Dr. Mandela's definition of education, then I'm going to be in trouble to the point that I may even be led to fail at university level, simply because I may not agree or have a different understanding or perspective from Nelson Mandela. So this is why then I came up with this definition of education. But then looking at its importance, I think education is key. Quality education actually is very important because it does help us focus on local needs. If you look at the curriculum of education in the country, it does not focus on local needs. So it has to focus on top of what I've just said. It must focus on local needs. This quality education, because in a sense, it does help. It builds people or future leaders who believe in themselves. It brings us back within into ourselves because we can be trained, I think, throughout higher education level. But then if we lack faith in ourselves, if we believe we cannot do it, we can't make it, we can't do it, we can't achieve it, somehow we'll find ourselves in a cocoon or in a box, so to speak. Like here in my country, where people, when for example there's this university that is having their graduation day, and when the media goes there, the media people go there and begin to interview the fresh graduates and ask them, for example, what is your perspective from today forward, what you plan to do. To me, it's very sad to hear people that have been in school for almost 16 years and then they tell you that I do not know, I'm not sure. But you have the degree, but then you still don't know what you're going to do next. So it's very common in my country, and this is why I believe that quality education must build people, help people. In addition to what they may learn from the process of education, that's still, by the end of the day, they have to believe in themselves. They have to have the consciousness that they are able and capable of making a difference in the world today. So, in a nutshell, I would say that this is the importance of quality education, because if they do that, they'll also help people build. It will build people, help them build their lives on their gifts and talents. Because since everybody is important, we are born with these gifts and talents. We've come to the world to manifest or use the gifts and talents to benefit, to help humanity, and all that was here shared with by my colleagues. So if people begin to awaken and to their gifts and talents, embrace them, and if they're trained to do that throughout their educational levels when they go through school or even university. So that will be qualitative because then they will use the same gifts and talents when they interviewed next when they graduate. They won't be necessarily able, they won't be saying, like we often hear in my country say, I do not know what I'm going to do next. So in a nutshell, this is how I would define quality education, but also and its importance. Thank you.
Thank you. Any last comments, Benjamin?
No, I was just saying, I mean, everybody has pretty much made a layup, 2
Yes,
points. So I'm
yes,
gonna
and,
hand
and
it back
and it
to
was just different hearing everyone's vision or what they what they thought quality education is to them, and everything that everyone said is correct. So you can't just take quality education, put it in a bucket, and this is what it is. It's so much broader than that. So I thank you for that answer. The next question is, I think I pulled the wrong sheet. So Benjamin, do you have your run script
yes.
in front of
We,
you?
yeah, we talked about the definition of quality. Let's look at like what Dr. Ronnie was talking about when he asked the different kids in different situations have different answers. So obviously, universally across the countries in the world, we're looking at different issues. So let's look now at some of the disparities that we have to address in our individual situations, our individual countries, our individuals, educational institutions. So let's talk about that a little bit of some of the gaps or some of the disparities that we're going to be looking to address as we move forward with this sustainable development goal. And I'll start with Dr. Ronnie, if you would.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate. Yeah, some very interesting definitions that are given by my colleagues. On quality education, I like that. But certainly, some of the disparities that I see when I look, when I read, when I observe life, it's really in that we're talking about this on a global level, okay? Um, but education systems are not global. Even in a world that has become global as it is today. Right, I'll kind of support my theory so that you can see what I mean. If we look at some other educational systems, for instance, the one that we have in my country, the United Kingdom, it's so mature that it's one of the key industries that we supply the world. Okay, just the education industry. We've got people right across the globe recruiting and taking people to come and get educated in this country. And the reason why we do that is, as imperfect the system is, it supplies the world because it is mature. Okay? It has been developed over centuries and centuries and consistently developed up to a point where it is today. So when we talk education and then compare that kind of a system with some other country that is still being made today, that is in the making, for instance, I'll give you some other countries that have attained independence in the last 50 to 100 years. Their systems are probably just still working on developing the economics of the country. And as much as we can argue that the economy of the country has to be sustained by education, it's probably the reverse way in some of the countries that we're talking about. So that's a clear disparity. And I believe what we need to do now is to come to some honest discussion about having, probably I'm jumping the gun now, but having a common framework, a common understanding of how we define education and how we deliver education, how it is applied on the grassroots. So we're talking about a rural school that is in the subcontinent of Asia, how it talks about education and delivers it has to somehow mirror what is happening globally. As much, Dr. Matthias has told us that it has to make sense locally. I appreciate that, it has to, but it has to have a synergy with what is happening everywhere because apparently the world has become global. So the education leaders, whether they're politicians or non-politicians, they have to have a common understanding and then localize the implementation of what education looks like. Thank you.
Breakdown of some of the disparities that you're dealing with. Professor Mateus, let's talk a little bit about what you see as some of the disparities, some of the gaps, and maybe some ideas that we can work on and look forward to trying to close those gaps and minimize the disparities.
Yes, thank you so much again for the mic. In my country, we are not we are taught we hear a lot of talks, speeches, and from the those people that are in power that talks they talk about as want to promote, for example, entrepreneurship, and they want us to become thinkers, so to speak. But then when you go to school, like you mentioned earlier on, we are not taught. We are so discouraged from being independent thinkers. It's like they want us to stay in a box somehow, probably because those in the power, maybe they can, if we stay in the box, then they can easily control the masses, so to speak. Because independent thinking, creativity is not encouraged. And I think this is a great disparity from what they are. They speak that sort of the politically speak, quote unquote, politically speak, and then from what we encourage to do at school. And in as much as we have to be embraced, like Dr. Ron said about what I mean, global, think globally and what's happening around the world, it's true. We do a lot of that in my country. We talk a lot. If you go to like from grade 1 to 12, you start the history, for example, you learn more about the first world. You hardly learn about the true history of your country or even the true history of your continent. So somehow, by the time I finish high school, it affects my thinking because I may develop an inferiority complex. Because then, by the end of the day, it's like they are superior than us. How can you study for 12 years? All you learn is about the first world. And there's basically maybe 1 or 2% you learn about your country and about your continent. That's a disparity because by the end of the day, like I said, I have the degree in my hands. I got a BA degree, but I don't believe in myself. I have low self-esteem. I don't value my own unique ideas. I don't value my uniqueness. So it's like I'm taught to forever be dependent, never independent. So, and this is a problem because then it forces what education wants to fight. Things like I think it was Dr. Benjamin mentioned human rights, talking about poverty, talking about illnesses, talk about all the 12, the 17 intentions of the sustainable United Nations sustainable goals. You find them being perfected in my country because I'm basically taught never to trust myself. And then if I don't, you see, it's even worse because I don't trust myself, but I'm also taught not to trust my neighbor. And when I'm speaking about neighbor here, I'm talking about skin color. So at the end of the day, I'm taught to be a global citizen, but at the end of the day, but at the same time, it's like I'm taught to believe that I am just a drop of water in the ocean. In other words, I'm aware of what's happening in the world, but I feel like, or I'm sort of irrelevant or even insignificant. So how can, by the end of the day, must be able to build or contribute with my gifts and talents towards the building or development of a better country like Mozambique, a better continent, and a better world? So it's like I'm just here to be what do you call this, like spectacle. Like I'm just here just to watch others on the stage. I'm just there to watch, and I got no role in this world. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, I believe strongly because that I think at least by the towards the end, beginning of the pandemic, the United Nations announced that the World Health Organization announced that we in Mozambique is the highest rate of suicide in the world. Can you imagine that? And if you come to my country, find that see mostly young people killing themselves. And if you go to the office of psychologists in the country or even the hospitals, you'll find young people, fresh university graduates, being admitted and staying in the hospitals for days because of depression. Why? Because all along they're taught you gotta go to school, you're gonna get so that you can have a better life, have a job, and all that. And they, all the lives they believed in that sermon, so to speak. But now they finish school, they can't find a job. They feel inferior. They feel insignificant. What can I do in life? At the end of the day, the rate of crime does increase basically in the country, and those that want to verge in with themselves engage into crime, they fall into deep depression, and others choose to commit a suicide. So this is one of the greatest disparities I see in my country. And the second one would be that if I'm not being repetitive, that we are not trained to identify and once again to solve local problems. I'm sure you might have heard this voice from the media that there's a war going on in the northern part of Mozambique called.
Hmm. Did he freeze on us?
He froze, yes.
Okay. Let me see. Let's give him a minute to see if he'll come back in before he does. I'll just there he is.
Yeah, there he is.
Okay.
The greatest minerals. Can you
Okay.
mention that? Thank you so much.
Wow.
Okay, Professor Matias, you cut off when you said, well, you froze when you said that there is a war going on in Mozambique.
Right.
Oh yes, yes. It's in the northern part of Mozambique called Cabo Delgado, where minerals like gold, red, and what's called this gold and oil been discovered, and that's where a war broke out. Supposedly the terrorists coming, which that's arose from nowhere. Nobody knows where they come from. In that same place, and it's interesting to find that when you go to the place where minerals have been discovered and there's war going on over there, that happens to be the poorest place in Cabo Delgado. And it's like sort of a special quote unquote city has been built, which only benefits those that are the ones in charge of mining. But the local people over there, they endlessly struggle.
Mm.
And this is a great disparity because if they found minerals over there, probably that should be the most developing place in the country. But it's just the worst.
Mm. Just a quick question for you, and this doesn't have anything to do with the disparity. I know when I met you maybe 2, 3 years ago, at that point, you were the youngest professor in Mozambique.
Right, right.
How did the older generation look upon you at that time?
It was not welcoming. It was just not welcoming.
Okay.
Okay.
Uh, mm.
Because
Listen,
it's like they
go ahead.
began to
Go ahead.
see me as a threat.
He froze.
Did they say they begin to see him as a threat?
That's what he said.
Wow. Instead of that unifying and bringing him in the fold as a young head, as my dad would say, a young cat, they, they sort of, I don't know, ostracized him. But apparently
Yes, he's back.
he,
He's back. So finish that thought because you froze
yes,
up on. They saw
yep.
you as a threat. Oh, he's gone.
I think he's still struggling to come on back. But, so
Mm,
he mentioned something that's, I think, is a byproduct of what we're talking about as far as
yes.
disparity and money and education. Because, I've been invited to go to Kansas to speak suicide prevention in
Mm-hmm.
their public schools and young adults. And this is brand new to me. And what I am seeing as I deal with the head of their school districts is the disparity in education and how it is affecting young adults and how the suicide level is steadily increasing here in the United States. And it's very painful to see some of the byproducts, if you will, of the struggles and the disparity that we're facing in education. And that's here in the United States. So what he's saying is it really hits home.
Yes.
And it's something that I'm looking to address almost as a byproduct. We often don't think suicide as a part of a lack of education and disparities, but it's all intertwined and it's all very, very global. But let me get off of my soapbox briefly. I do have some more thoughts on it, but I want to hear Professor Jared's thoughts on the disparity and some of the things that they're facing over there in Kenya.
Because I know they are in Kenya. I know it's very high and it's very bad, but we'll let Professor Jarrett speak on that. He's from that area. He's more abreast of what's going on over there than what I've been hearing. So, Professor,
So,
I'm not able to unmute.
yep, we heard you.
you were unmuted.
Right there, right there. No, it's going back and forth. There you go.
Yeah. Before I go to address the disparities of education of course, education in my country. Remember, as we were ushering in Sustainable Development Goals in 2015, we had Action 2015 to see where Millennium Development Goals failed. And now we are in 2022, 7 years up the line. Is there really commitment that really we want to address quality education? Is it really from where you sit? Is there really a commitment? Be it as it may, that's a challenge to our audience and my fellow panelists, that the world is facing a crisis in learning. While countries have significantly increased access to education, being in school isn't the same as being as learning. You can be in school, no facilities, no nothing. That is not what we call quality education. And around the world, we have had hundreds and millions of children reach adulthood without even most basic skills. What am I trying to say is this: that some of the curriculum, in February, when we had this kind of conversation, we were talking about CPC, competence-based curriculum. We were discussing this. And in fact, we will be having the first cohort sitting exams in the next 2 weeks. But again, we are not very sure that we want to go that kind of direction. So what I'm trying to say that the curriculum itself does not consider on how to develop the children or the learners. And I think everyone is intelligent on their own way, but the curriculum in my country, before we are moving to CPC, is that a child goes to school, he sits down, he listens to the teacher, and is able to solve mathematical problems, but it does not consider the capability of a child. And where is quality education? That is a major challenge in my country. And the next disparities is that the SDG number 1, poverty, anger, SDG number 2. Can children go to school with an empty stomach and we expect them to learn? And we talk about quality education. Remember, 15 years from the year 2000 to 2015, we tried to address anger and even poverty. We did not move. So this is, and let me not talk about stories. Let me just give you a very good definition. When I was joining high school, that is at the point where I had to wear shoes. And we had to buy the shoe, carry it to the school, walking barefooted. When I'm being asked to wear the shoes, I show them the authority of the school, and then they give me permission to wear. High school. I have had cases where children perform very well. but they cannot be able to proceed to high school. Why? Poverty. Another challenge or disparity as we talk about education, we don't have teachers. How do you have a teacher taking 300 children in a classroom? And we are talking about quality education. And when a teacher is supposed to have 30 to 35 pupils in a class, that's a very big challenge in my country. We are talking about gender equality. We are trying to address equality among the disadvantaged families. There are girls who do not attend classes due to lack of sanitary towels. And as we are going to address one of the questions on the projects we have in mind, the girl child is so dear to me. She is not given equal opportunity like the boy child. And there are some notorious communities in my country, even in Matthias' country, whereby the girl child is not given an opportunity to proceed to school. They see the girl as a source of wealth. That immediately she has reached 14, 15 years, she's married off so that she can try to bring income and wealth to the family. That's why we need to address sustainable development in totality. We cannot jump to implement quality education, number 4, when we have not addressed poverty, when we have not addressed food, when we have not addressed health. How can a sick child go to school? How can a sick child go to school? And again, I've talked about facilities. We don't have classrooms. Children sit under the tree with the scorching sun. Then we talk about that. Those are the realities in my country. In every society, there is what we believe in which should be considered not to be true. There are some communities that are tied to culture. That one I've addressed. You want me to give a very good example? The Samburus of Kenya, the Maasais of Kenya, the Pokot, just to mention a few, who believe the girls are meant to be wives and not to be educated. Those are the kind of disparities we are talking about. The Sustainable Development Goal number 4 ensures an inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning. Despite the considerable progress on education access and participation, there are children and youth who are still out of school. I've said we are facing the worst kind of drought in my country. Children are not going to school. They don't know, they cannot know when they had a meal and when they can have the next meal. So education, that's a serious disparity that we have in my country and some parts of Africa. I believe that education has power to shape the world. That one you cannot persuade me to change that. A quality experience in the classroom helps promote mutual respect and understanding between people. So if these children are not going to school, they are not able to attend, and at the end of the day, they are required to sit for an exam. Let me just conclude on that part by saying it is never too late for the young people to have opportunities to learn. If we only say, let us walk this journey without leaving anyone behind. That was a clarion call as we were ushering sustainable development goals, but we have left some people behind as others are advancing. I submit.
Okay. Thank you for that. I do have a question to go along with everything that you just said, though. And Dr. or Professor Matias had to jump off because he's having internet connection issues. So, Professor Gier, with everything that you just said, what is your team's action plan to bring global awareness to this issue? global, around the world, quality education team?
Yes, yes, that's a very good question. That's a very good question, and I intend to see it through the lens of sustainable development number 17. Global partnership is the way to go. We have to work in cooperation. We have to have an engagement and coordination. And in fact, what we are doing today is moving forward towards solving those kind of problems. When we share this kind of challenges and experiences, we are trying to look for a way on how to work together. And I'm saying that our society is being treated on how they treat the weak. I've given an analysis of what's happening to my country, that the girl child does not go to school. The girl child is married off when it's not even reached the age of to be married or to be married on. So the way forward is to work on cooperation, is to share experiences, is to keep on talking. Is try, and that's why in our group I was very clear on my mind that we must go towards signing a treaty. Not only our leaders coming to United Nations, they have good time and come back to Africa to their respective countries, so that we can be able to from that treaty we can be able to work together and see that it is a commitment from those countries which are able, and I'm sometimes I'm happy with what UK do to Kenya and African countries, to what America does through USAID. So they should, those who have more, who God has blessed more, should be able to support us so that we can move forward. And the way I look at it, we have to strain this dragon of corruption. We have got all the resources, but our resources are not utilized properly. So what I'm trying in the nutshell here is that we should have a conversation, we should have an engagement, and we should be able to provide ideas and solutions, because I intend from where we sit that we have a solution, which we need to have respective communities and societies and government to move forward.
Okay. So I do want to correct that about the solution. We really don't want to use the word solution as we have these conversations. I mean, we can give them recommendations or whatnot, but we don't want to say that this is going to fix it, because we don't know. So Dr. Ronnie, I'll leave the last word for Benjamin, because I know he's going to give us how this treaty is going to work. So Dr. Ronnie.
Yeah, sure. I must concur and agree with what my brother, Professor Jared, is talking about. We cannot talk about quality education in isolation to the rest of the sustainable goals. But I think that's what the world has done and made mistakes. Each goal stands in isolation in its own silo, yes, and it takes its own direction, and things will not work. And I think what is needed is dialogue. And certainly what this team is doing, you'll be pleased to know that, like Benjamin is going to expand in a minute, we're looking at a common, not agreement, perhaps it becomes an agreement fair enough, a common framework, if I may put it, that kind of discusses some common establishments of what education looks like across the world, whereby we get some higher authorities in different countries come together, co-produce a framework under which everyone can learn from, and from it we can have common practice. It will be like a platform of sharing best practice that hopefully we can resource, or the world can resource, and learn from, and training evolves from that, and then that's delivered to all the way to the grassroots. But what we should bear in mind is what Professor Jared is talking about. That very class that is learning under the tree
Mhm.
It has to be in the framework. It has to be talked about. It shouldn't be forgotten because they're learning under the weather. One other thing that I just want to say in that, Dr. Sonia, is COVID has exposed the disparities in education across the world. In my country, here in the UK, um, it's really hit us hard across the world. You know, the UNICEF talks about close to 2 trillion hours of education lost.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if we're going to talk about any mitigations in such situations in future, or if we talk about any framework that we may put in place, it has to think ahead of time. It has to think about, what if we have COVID type situations in future? How are we going to react in that? How about that young girl who's got a need that Dr. Ronnie talked about? How about that one who doesn't have access to ICT? Are they going to be able to learn on Teams or on Zoom? Are they going to access a digital class? We really need to think and hone in on these nitty gritties if there's going to be any equity in quality education. So I won't go deeper into it because my brother here is going to jump onto it and expand on it. But certainly, in terms of bringing together the world leadership, whoever be they, to talk about this further and have a common understanding of what quality education looks like and support everyone in implementing it. That's the
Yes.
way forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Benjamin,
Yes, ma'am.
you get the last question or the last
Last,
response.
last response. Interesting that you should save me for last, because my brothers have they have articulated well. I know we're winding down on time, so I won't go into everything, but I will say a couple of key points. When I joined the CDG and as an executive board member, and I was the liaison to this team, it was laid in my spirit the very first meeting we had was this crazy idea that we should have a treaty, a universal treaty, a universal commonality, something that doesn't have the solutions as you respectfully submitted, but it has some policies, it has some ideas, it has some lofty goals, something that we can look to as a world, as a global citizens and say, this is the baseline, this is the foundation, this is what we aspire to. Because as Dr. Jared mentioned, 2015 to 2022, he feels that not much has been accomplished. Me being a military guy, being a trial lawyer, I like to see results. I like to see remedies. We talked about the ideas, we identified disparities, we defined it. Now we must put pen to paper, and I often say, and I said I would refer to this, I referred to this earlier when Nelson Mandela talked about a powerful weapon. We must now put boots on the ground. Airstrikes is great. Sea and land strikes is great. That weakens the enemy. I get it. But listen, people. Yeah, I know it's crazy. Tighten your seatbelts because I may have some warfare type analogies, but I don't mean anything violent. I mean here, because this is the most powerful weapon we will ever produce, is right here. And this in where education in life right here. So putting boots on the ground, putting money where your mouth is, putting true value into what we need to do, I believe, and I know Professor Jarrett was like, wow, when I mentioned this, I got some pushback in other areas, but my team really, because they're living it, they're seeing it, they're seeing kids learning under a tree, they're seeing the effect of COVID in the United States, in my neighborhood. Prince George's County, Waldorf, Maryland. I'm understanding that kids don't have internet, they don't have laptops, they can't get educated in 2020. So when I began to evaluate education, I see it in two ways. My mind as a lawyer, I think substantive and procedural. So substantively, we mentioned a lot of things. We got to increase the the books. We got to have the teach classrooms. So yes, we are going to work on those things, and they are going to be crystal clear in the document. I will be working on and presenting to the United Nations February 9th in Nairobi, Kenya. I will personally present it if I'm asked to do so. I will personally draft it, and we will present it as a team, and I will take the lead. I will present it, and we will present it at the General Assembly in New York. They need to hear very clearly and loudly that we have a lot of documents, and I'll briefly give a couple of documents. We have UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. They have a document. We have the Universal Document on Human Rights. They have a document. We have the International Covenant on Economic and Social and Cultural Rights. They have a document. We have the Convention on the Rights of a Child. They have a document. We have the United Nations Millennium Declaration. They have a document. We have the United Nations Member Statements, which is a powerful document that there is 114 countries that have issued a statement that they're willing to make a commitment. Now we're about to see what that means because Professor Jared mentioned we need a commitment. So we're about to address each of those nations independently, directly. What is your commitment? You got to put some money where your mouth is. You got to put action. And we're going to challenge them to sign off on this treaty as we develop this treaty, go into training so they can understand as they go back to their respective countries, what are we looking, what the policies that we are going to try to institute. I envision we will have a committee where the committee can go in and assist with boots on the ground with each of these 114 nations that are already signatories to this commitment and work with their leaders, Secretary of Education, czars of education, so we can work with these leaders and establishing, again, policies as to what a baseline should look like universally so that we can minimize some of the disparities that we're facing throughout the world in education. And COVID notwithstanding, it showed us these things, but these things existed well before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So now the challenge is, okay, we see them. What the hell are we going to do about them? And my thing is, okay, let's start with the air bombs. Let's start with the sea bombs. Let's tighten up our boots. Let's put up some money. Let's get on the ground. So I did some math the other day, and math is not my strong point. So I did some numbers, and I was like, you know what? If these 114 countries that have signed this document, that they would that they're committed to changing the educational system. Let's say if they each put in, I don't know, let's say $250,000, which should be a layup for a country, even the smallest countries. We start out with a budget at 28.5 million. If they put in 100,000, we're looking at 11.8 million. Do you know what I and my team and the CGC and we can do with $11.8 million budget to get started? We're formulating committees after the treaty has been drafted to going into these countries, discussing what their challenges are, their disparities, and working with their governments on statutes, laws, tax breaks, tax shelter, tax benefits to raise money and to create money that's specific for education, to teach them to understand the new narrative is education is a human right. So let's see you now put your commitment in your money where you recognize this to be a human right. So to answer your question in a general sense, yes, we have an idea that we've already started working on, that we're creating, that we're going to call the International Education Treaty. It may even have to start out as a multilateral agreement, but we anticipate this sustainable development goal to do what we call the law is to be codified. It will codify all those documents that I just listed and the other 100 out there that are segmented all over the world. It will codify these into a document that illustrates the commitment and some uniformity, some universality in how we're going to approach eliminating some of these disparities, coming up with policies and goals and ideas, and truly, truly a grassroots effort to actually define quality education and watch it happen and make it happen. And it's going to start with us right here. Now, it's a lot. One of the main things I will speak about very briefly is the financial aspect, but there's organizations. There's an organization that the UN is looking to create. It's called the International Financial Facility for Education, the IFED. So there's things out there that we can codify and bring under our IET, the International Education Treaty, to really make these things happen. I think we're moving in a direction, but I'm with Professor Jared. I do nothing that slow. It's time to actually create a document, a governing document that we agree on as a people, as citizens, so that I see my brother in Nairobi, Kenya, what he's going through. I'm not someone in the United States saying, oh, well, yeah, that's pretty bad, but let me continue doing what I'm doing. No, that we come together and we see what's happening there. We see what's happening even right here at home. And we codify all these documents and all the research and all this going on in a universal international treaty and then start moving that forward with boots on the ground. And I'll conclude with this Chinese proverb that I think is a great way of ending it. If you're planning for tomorrow, let's sow rice. Cool. We all like rice. If you're planning for decades, let's plant some trees. You opened up talking about all these fancy trees, and you're learning so much about trees. Trees are cool. You can teach under a tree. You can get some shade under a tree. You can have class under a tree. You have a picnic under a tree. Trees are cool. Rice is cool. But if you are planning for a lifetime, you educate. You educate. And that's going to be the bottom line foundation for this treaty. Planning for a lifetime, life well after all of us, our grandchildren, our great people that aren't even born. Let's start planting for that. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Sonia.
Okay, so I just have a couple comments. I think it's a great idea, the treaty. I think when you shared the information, it sort of sounded like the treaty was going to come first and the training later. But is the intent to roll it out with the training to get everyone's buy-in to, and then comes the treaty?
Yes, ma'am. The training is going to be a prerequisite before you become a signatory to the treaty. So there will be a training program for each head of state, whoever they assign as their liaison, if you will, to our the development of the treaty. And there will be a program that we're putting together that they have to go to and complete the training, be certified. And then when they return to their respective state, the respective country, they would have completed the training so that there's a universal buy-in and understanding that these are the policies and the goals that we're striving toward, and then they have input. It will be a collaboration through the training and input, and at the end result of all of the training, we anticipate an international ceremony where each state will sign off on the treaty as a signatory via their delegate that has been trained through the training program. So yes, I'm glad you brought that up because I want to be clear that the training will come prior to your ability to sign on the treaty. Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to make sure we were all clear that we have to put it out there, let them review, give them some training, and make sure that they are in agreement. So because we're saying we want to be inclusive. We talked about diversity. We talked about having buy-in around the world. So we don't want to go out there and say, here, sign this. We want to go out there and make it seem like we're doing this as a team. So that's what I wanted to be clear on. So yes, you cleared that up for me.
Definitely clear. And we will be building an alliance, if you will. I'm a big Star Wars fan. The alliance was Luke Skywalker and the good guys, right? So they had to build this alliance. So I'm big on building collaborations and building the alliance. So we will be building the alliance every step of the way. And we're going to start with some of the foundations that's laid by the UN with these 114 countries that have committed. They start with, it's just an excellent place to start. And so we're going to start there and we may be able to increase, but definitely this will not work. Again, just like a military, what's happening with Russia and Ukraine. You need an alliance. You need your allies. You need the coalition. You need to have build a strong team. So we are going to be building that with input because I'm never the smartest person in the room, which is a good thing. So we're going to get input from various nations, from various leaders, from various people that are much smarter than I am. So most definitely.
Okay. So I thank you for your time today. I don't want to hold you that much longer because we're already over time. But this was a great conversation, and and it's like I said before, there's a lot of things that happen with or within quality education. So it's not just one isolated area; it's
Right.
everything, and pretty much everything starts with education. So I just can't repeat that enough for people to understand. Again, as I said before, I don't want you to think because I've gone through school, I'm educated. No, education is an ongoing thing. Education will be here until you die. So every day you should be trying to educate yourself to know more. And it gets back to exactly what this team has been saying, what they want to do. And they're going to also have to do some collaboration with other people. I just saw Barbara Brown make a comment about, yeah, okay, let's start planning. Now you're bringing in other people because now they're starting to understand what it is that you're trying to do. That's getting educated, and you'll get more of that, because people know that you're trying to help them. So with help, people are willing to. Here's another note from her. She's good. How do you build if you can't see? Go
Mm.
ahead, Barbara Brown. So again, this is how we get that momentum going. This is how we move forward. And again, I thank you guys for your time today. I look forward to what you're going to do. I look forward for your output. I look forward to seeing you in Nairobi for February 9th for the United Nations thing. And then again back here in the United States. So keep building, keep moving, and keep doing what you do. And if there are any other questions, I'm going to open it up real quickly to Benjamin if he has any questions to close us out with. And then I'm going to ask Dr. Ronnie to pray us out.
Not a question, but I'm glad Barbara Brown mentioned something because I want to give people a homework assignment that they can start to think about, and they can submit these to us so we can start thinking about them. If you know anything about Franklin D. Roosevelt, he was the 32nd president, and he created something called the New Deal. The New Deal had three key R's. Our three R's are a little different because we're going to be creating what the UN kind of started, a new global deal. And the three R's that he had was relief, reform, and recovery. Our three R's that people can start to think about and give us some ideas is reframe. We're going to reframe this issue to making um, um, education a human right. We are going to reform it, and we're going to restore it in restoration. And we're going to restore so the understanding is this is based on education. It is based on understanding the value of human life, and each human life is equally valuable, and that it is entitled to an education. So if you take those three R's, um, reframe, reform, and restore. Take those three words, write them down, think about them, give us your thoughts on them. And those are going to be the basis of things that we use as we create the treaty, or what I like to call the global New Deal. The global New Deal. So everyone has some homework. I love giving homework. Education, right?
So what you said, this is how we're going to bring back civility for everyone, huh?
You got it.
So back
One
to
person at a
what Attorney Benjamin was just saying, you're probably thinking, well, how am I going to get that information to you,
time. Yep.
Benjamin? So you can go to our website, www.icncgc.com, and there's an area in there that you could fill out that'll come right into us. It'll go through, the system and whatnot, but we'll get a printout of what it is that you're saying. So please feel free to be able to go in and put your information in that way. Again, www.icncgc.com, or feel free to add it to the feed that's currently out there in Facebook, and we'll grab it from there. But again, I thank you, Dr. Ronnie, if you will.
Thank you. And just as I get to pray, just to tell you that we're in a time of actioning. This is not just talk and talk and talk. We want to implement, and you guys, you can choose, whoever is listening now, you can choose to come on board and be part of this great restoration that is coming. And it's a great wave. Those that are gonna follow and take the direction of it, they'll see the benefits. So come on board. It's time to act. We want your ideas. We want to produce this together with you. It's not about us. We don't have solutions. You have the solutions that we need. Let's do it together. And let's pray. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, just want to thank you even for such a great moment that you've given us, oh God, to speak about that which you've deposited on our hearts regarding the empowerment, the equipping and the training and the educating of anybody, oh God, young and old, who wish to go through education systems. God, we've shared a common understanding that this is the weapon that we need to develop the world that you gave us. You entrusted us, oh God, with a complex world that needs understanding of a special measure. And God, you've used this group to discuss how we can achieve this. We pray, therefore, God, for the leadership of the world, those who hold powers to make decisions over budgets, to prioritize education, those, oh God, who are going through education systems of any sort, oh God, to know that they're not forgotten. Pray, God, for everybody, every citizen of the world to start to talk about education. I pray, God, every blessing on this vision. And I pray that you enable us, oh God, to open doors that have been closed for such a long time. I pray, God, that the education system of every single country will be one that empowers, that equips, that trains and prepares people for a great future. We give you glory, oh Father. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
I will see you guys backstage, so let me go ahead and end it. Thank
Okay.
you again, and thank you everyone. And I will see you in 2 weeks, and we will be doing peace, justice, and strong institutions, followed by good health and well-being and food equity. I had to remember that. So see you in 2 weeks.